All doctors are bound by a sacred oath. First, do no harm. So how does that oath square with this statement from a doctor in Dallas, Oregon?
None of us once wore a mask in my clinic.
Plus, it was one night in June, during a summer of nights that all kind of started to blend together. But a judge says police tactics that one night went too far.
This is a monumental decision.
And when we finally have a COVID-19 vaccine, will your job be able to require that you get it? The answer is yes. But here's the story.
Yeah, but, hi, I'm Dan Haggerty. Welcome to The Story. So we got a couple of stories in the rundown tonight that my grandmother would have called doozies. And you may agree with that kind of assessment. You may, turn to the person next to you and say something like, you know what, that story was a real doozy. And since we regularly do doozies on this show, we make it really easy for you to comment on them or ask questions about them. It's right at the bottom of your screen, all the ways to touch base with us. Facebook, email, Twitter, Instagram, all that works. At least I'm being told it does. Send in your ideas. Let's hear what you got to say. Use that hashtag, Hey Dan, don't forget. Now, I want to start by updating you on two leaders in Oregon who found themselves kind of in some hot water for similar reasons, not identical, but similar. Future chair of the Clackamas County Board of Commissioners, Tootie Smith on the left there, and current Multnomah County Commissioner Sharon Myron on the right. Now, Tootie Smith is the one who planned to throw that big Thanksgiving party in defiance of Governor Brown's 2-week freeze. As for Commissioner Myron, she pushed for stronger COVID restrictions while on a 2-week vacation in Hawaii. And both are handling the criticism they received in very different ways. So yesterday, Commissioner Myron addressed her Hawaiian vacation in her November newsletter. First, she added some context. She said that she actually left before the governor's orders were in place, and she insisted she took all of the safety protocols the entire time, including getting a test. But she also offered some regret here, saying, quote, as a public figure, and especially as a strenuous advocate around our state's COVID response, I should have thought more carefully about how my decision could be perceived by and would impact others. In retrospect, and especially at this new inflection point in the pandemic, it seems obvious. I deeply regret that I did anything that would distract from the incredible work being done by frontline workers, the sacrifices being made by families not seeing loved ones, and the broader public health work that, as cases surge and more lives are being lost, must remain our shared focus. As for Chair-elect Tootie Smith, she hasn't really said any of that. I'd love to tell you how her Thanksgiving was, whether she ended up having that really big party with all the people she knew, but she won't return my calls. She hasn't hit me back just yet, but if she does, I'll keep you posted. But maybe the most brazen example of flouting the COVID recommendations didn't actually come from an elected leader. It came from a doctor, of all people, in Dallas, Oregon, who not only doesn't wear a mask inside his clinic, but he doesn't even really think that COVID is a thing anymore, at least not a thing the way that we're talking about it every night. Kyla Boshi tried to track him down today.
An Oregon doctor working at this family practice near Salem has refused to wear a mask while treating patients, despite government orders to help limit the spread of COVID-19.
My name is Steve LaTulip. I am a practicing physician in Dallas, Oregon.
The doctor's controversial comments were captured on video during a Stop the Steal election rally in Salem on November 9th, then posted on YouTube by the Multnomah County Republican Party.
I hate to tell you this, it might scare you, but I and my staff, none of us once wore a mask in my clinic.
In the video, Dr. Stephen LaTulip admitted breaking COVID rules. In Oregon, an executive order says healthcare personnel are required to wear a face mask or face covering while in a healthcare office with limited exceptions. The Centers for Disease Control and Federation of State Medical Boards have similar guidance requiring masks to stop the spread of COVID-19 by helping prevent respiratory droplets from spreading.
I petition all of you, please take off the mask of shame. It is a mask that is just designed to control you and to shut you down.
Dr. LaTulip owns and operates Southview Medical Arts in Dallas. His name and contact information appear on the Salem Health website. When questions were raised, Salem Health distanced itself from the doctor, explaining, Dr. LaTulip is not employed by Salem Hospital, nor does he provide care at any Salem Health hospital or clinic location. They said his name is simply listed in a directory of local doctors.
I want to expose what I call coronamania.
The doctor's defiant speech came to light after another controversy involving a healthcare worker. An oncology nurse at Salem Health was put on administrative leave after she posted a TikTok video where she bragged about violating the state's pandemic restrictions. On Tuesday, the Oregon Health Authority reported 24 COVID-related deaths, the highest single-day total of the pandemic. We tried to reach Dr. LaTulip for comment. His wife said after speaking with his lawyer, he might, but only if we spoke face-to-face at his clinic. I agreed face-to-face was fine, but outside, socially distanced, and preferably wearing masks. She hung up, and we haven't heard back. Kyle Aboshi, KGW News.
That was a big story. That felt like a big story, but that was not the big story. Tonight's big story is about protests, but not just any protest. I know that all the nights of protests that we've seen here in Portland kind of all started to melt together for a little bit there for a while. But tonight, we're going to be zooming in on one night in particular in June in North Portland, a protest at the Portland Police Association headquarters that turned into probably one of the most aggressive confrontations that we had seen up to that point. So aggressive that it led to a lawsuit against police. And now a judge has issued a ruling on that lawsuit against the city. Maggie Vespa dug into the police action that got the Bureau in trouble and what it could end up costing the city of Portland.
This is a monumental decision.
Portland's anti-police protests have continued, at times nightly, for months. But this week, attorneys for the group Don't Shoot Portland are celebrating a federal judge's ruling tied to one specific night. This is video from the night of June 30th. Hundreds had gathered outside the North Portland headquarters for the Portland Police Association, the union that represents officers. Police said people in the crowd threw water bottles, rocks, and cans. Cameras rolled as officers responded with tear gas and pepper spray. This despite a federal court order filed 4 days earlier banning police from using those tactics unless officers believed someone's life or safety was in danger. Oregon's House Speaker called officers' actions that night unacceptable. Police Chief Chuck Lavelle said officers had no choice but to protect the PPA headquarters.
As we would have seen one building lit on fire in a neighborhood where a commercial building fire could have led to residences being burned with families inside.
In the aftermath, Don't Shoot Portland sued, and Monday, citing testimony from officers and videos of the protest, the judge who ordered police to dial down their tactics agreed officers had violated that order. As a result, he found the city of Portland in contempt. Judge Marco Hernandez cited 3 specific violations, none involving tear gas. Instead, he zeroed in on officers who fired less lethal munitions at people in the crowd. One of whom, the judge wrote, was holding a banner that said, "Abolish the police." Another person, he wrote, stepped toward police to pick an object up off the ground. Judge Hernandez writing, none of the individuals targeted by police in these incidents were engaged in active aggression. Juan Chavez is an attorney with the Oregon Justice Resource Center. He's helping represent the plaintiffs with Don't Shoot Portland.
And do you feel like this night was different, or was it an example of ongoing tactics?
It might have been novel at the time, but I think it's just another day.
Chavez argues the timing of this night is important. Protests had been going on for about a month following the death of George Floyd. They often began with peaceful marches and devolved into violent clashes. Keep in mind, it would be weeks before President Trump's deployment of federal agents to Portland. Chavez believes this ruling serves as a pivotal referendum on how local law enforcement respond to demonstrations.
All the tactics that we saw that night, all those things we have seen only amplified over the last few months. And because the city never really got in trouble for that, things just never quite righted themselves.
He also notes the plaintiffs didn't get everything they wanted. In the suit, they claimed police violated the judge's order 9 times. But in 6 of those instances, the judge found police had reason to fear for their or others' safety. KGW reached out to the Portland Police Bureau and the PPA. Both declined to comment on the ruling. In a statement, Mayor and Police Commissioner Ted Wheeler wrote, "I want to thank the court for its thoughtful opinion. I am committed to improving policing in our city. Where the court found errors, we will implement changes." Plaintiffs and attorneys with the city are expected to meet in the coming weeks to iron out sanctions or punishments tied to officers' actions that night.
Okay, Maggie Vespa joining us now. So, Maggie, let's talk a second about these sanctions or the punishments that the city will face here. You were saying the two sides still need to iron things out, but that leads me to believe at this point we just don't know yet.
Yeah, we don't know yet. And I asked Chavez about that, and he said, frankly, the plaintiffs haven't agreed on their demands for the sanctions, so he didn't want to commit to anything. Obvious options are the city would have to pay the plaintiffs some amount of money, or they could also ban certain crowd control tactics and munitions moving forward. So those are definite options going into this. We also kind of turned for some perspective to a local law professor, Tung Yin with Lewis and Clark. And he kind of pointed out as well, he kind of wanted people to notice that in a case this monumental and this public, the judge, like in any other case, could have decided on the sanctions himself, but he obviously didn't. He wants the parties to agree to them. Take a listen to what he said.
That kind of approach of, I'm going to make the ruling that determines that there was a violation, but I'm going to wait for the sanctions, I think sometimes is an indication that the judge isn't really sure themselves what the right sanction should be. And, maybe it's sort of a hope that the parties can get together and agree amongst themselves.
And so, Dan, if the parties can't agree on these sanctions, then Yin says in that case, the judge would step in and kind of have to make the final decision. And as far as a time frame is concerned, Chavez says they hope to have this wrapped up within the next few weeks. So we'll likely know soon.
All right. I'm sure you'll let us know what happens, Maggie. Thank you.
And we've covered these protests so many times. During all of them, it wasn't uncommon if you were watching the protests, if you went down there yourself, to see signs being held down there for people who wanted prisons to be abolished. Well, it might not be exactly what protesters had in mind specifically, but today Governor Kate Brown released her recommended $25 billion state budget for the next 2 years, and it includes closing 3 of Oregon's 16 prisons. Now, remember, the budget still needs to be adopted. These are just recommendations right now. But if adopted, these 3 prisons would shut down, according to the governor's proposal. Shutter Creek Correctional Institution in North Bend, Warner Creek Correctional Institution in Lakeview, and Mill Creek Correctional Facility in Salem. The governor said, quote, "Oregon no longer needs to maintain costly prison capacity and can now move forward with reductions in beds while maintaining appropriate supervision of adults in custody and keeping Oregonians safe." Now, activists, they might be very happy to hear that, but I'm not sure. But the rural communities that rely on those prisons for hundreds of jobs, they may wonder kind of what this all means for them. Not to mention the questions about what we do with the prisoners. Now, at times, the answer to that often comes down to other forms of rehabilitation, like maybe with a doctor or a counselor or at a hospital. But hospitals, they kind of have their own problems right now. The governor's budget proposal calls for big cuts. Yeah, you heard me correctly there. Cuts to hospitals during a pandemic. Now, for some more context on that, I called KGW political analyst Len Bergstein to kind of walk us through really what that means, why those calls are being made right now. And here's some of our conversation.
When you hear kind of the headline that the governor is proposing cuts to hospitals, all we've been talking about is how thinly they've been, worked during COVID, and how elected procedures are down big time, which is one of the big money makers for hospitals. So for the average person, they're thinking, wait a minute, how are they cutting funding to those entities? Can you explain more the thinking behind that?
Hospital financing is a very complicated thing, and over the years, the hospitals have probably felt like they've given their share at the office to help with the Oregon health plan or whatever. They, in fact, do generate a tremendous amount of money, though, particularly in terms of the numbers of procedures that they're able to generate through electives or others. Their emergency rooms are big moneymakers, and so if you look through the intricacies of hospital financing, they do okay. Now, when they are in a pandemic and they have to deal with these high-cost procedures and they have to shut down their elective procedures, they wind up being in a crunch. And I'm sure that they were hoping that there would be some sort of other tax and spending tools that the governor would use to help really kind of refill the budget gap as opposed to kind of cutting back on procedures or payments.
The other controversy that we're talking about has to do with prisons. It's interesting. There have been a lot of calls to abolish prisons, and maybe the governor is listening because she's considering abolishing 3 of them, closing 3 of our state's prisons down. What's your take on that?
Well, I think that's you take a ticket and watch the fight. I mean, those are going to be very big budget battles because the prisons not only represent a way to take care of a certain population, whatever, but they also are economic engines for communities. North Bend and Lakeview are, I think, 2 of the areas, and Salem being the 3rd. These are critical parts of their economies, and the governor's taken that into consideration, but she just looked at the problem, wants to get out of the business of warehousing prisoners, and this was an area where I think she can save something like $50 million over a budget cycle or 2. So it's a big savings, but it's a big controversy.
I'm sure we'll be talking about more controversies when it comes to a budget that big during a time like we're living through right now. But obviously, we are talking a lot about cuts right now. But the governor also wants to allocate millions of dollars toward housing, $66 million for housing and homelessness, $20 million in homeowner assistance, and $250 million in affordable housing development. Now, as far as small business assistance is concerned, the governor said we're more or less relying on the federal government, on Congress to do something, to get their act together and pass some type of bill. And if you have a small business, that's something that needs to happen fast because those benefits are going to expire on December 31st. Now, when the story continues, stories of getting, receiving, and giving. First, getting a coronavirus vaccine. Why your job can require it, but you don't really have to listen to them. Second, Portland's most famous drag club receiving a huge honor that no other LGBTQ establishment has in Portland. And third, all the ways you can give on this Giving Tuesday. Hi, welcome back. We're not above begging here on the story. You probably figured that out after the 1 millionth time I've asked you to use the hashtag HeyDan or to email us at thestory@kgw.com. Even in my explanation, I tend to repeat myself, but we want you to do one thing more than anything else tonight, and that's to follow us on Instagram at @TheStoryKGW, because we really want to get to that 1,000 follower mark. It's an ego thing. All right, I have to have it. Who knows, too, if you are the 1,000th follower, maybe we might give you a shout out or something. Maybe. I don't know. I probably will. But I do know that I have a great question right now from a viewer named Gene Putnam. Gene asked, is it legal in Oregon for employers to require employees to be vaccinated to continue their employment? And talk about a relevant question right now. Today a CDC panel got together to make a decision, a massive decision about who gets the COVID-19 vaccine first. The FDA is going to take a look at both Pfizer and Moderna's vaccine later this month. And between the 2 companies, there still may only be about 40 million doses to go around. But you have to keep in mind that each person gets 2 doses for it to be effective. So that's only 20 million people. Right now, it sounds like frontline healthcare workers will be the first in line to get vaccinated, followed by people in long-term care facilities. But as for Gene's question, and how question goes, we may have an answer. And the short answer is yes, they can. But, and there's a big but, yes, companies can create vaccination requirements to employment, like a lot of hospitals do with the flu vaccine, for instance. Every state, though, allows medical exemptions for one thing or another, like people maybe who take medication that weakens their immune system or people with certain diseases. On top of that, Oregon is also one of 15 states that allows religious and philosophical exemptions to vaccines. Now, last year, lawmakers tried to remove those exemptions, but they failed. But it did draw a lot of attention and people to Salem from both sides.
We have a lot of really good scientific evidence that says that vaccines are very safe and they're really effective at protecting us against these diseases.
And if you don't do it, then your kids are going to get thrown out of school. And that is an extreme bill.
So, long story short, companies can require vaccines, but it's relatively easy to get around actually getting one. So thank you so much for your question. I hope we answered it enough for you. Now, here in the story, we like to recommend things for you to check out. So here's something that we think is worth your time. It's Forbes 30 Under 30 sports list featuring young people in the sports world. And one person on that list is a University of Portland grad, Malika Andrews. And she's a reporter at ESPN. She was hired in 2018 after graduating from UP, where she was editor-in-chief of the Beacon student newspaper. You may have seen her covering the NBA in the bubble earlier this year. That list right now, if you want to read a little bit more about her, share it with your friends, you know, do it. It's up right now, Forbes.com, if you want to check it out. Now, a couple of weeks ago, we told you about a Portland icon who reached a huge milestone. Darcel, the world's oldest drag queen, turned 90 years old last month. Here she is at her birthday celebration. You probably know that she has owned Club Darcel's in Old Town for more than 50 years. Well, now that club has reached a milestone of its own. The National Park Service has added it to the National Register of Historic Places. Congressman Earl Blumenauer made that announcement on Twitter. You see it here after campaigning for the club to be added to the list earlier this year. As he notes, Darcel's is the first LGBTQ historic site designated in the state of Oregon. And that is a big first because Oregon has more than 2,000 historic places on the National Register. You can probably guess some of them, you know, Multnomah Falls, for instance, the Lodge there, Vista House, and the Hollywood Theater. They're all on the list, but there are some small places on there too. So many, you might have some in your neighborhood. If you want to get on the list or something that you think should be on a list, a place must be more than 50 years old, and place can mean a lot of different things. It could be a house, it could be a building, an object, even an entire area. It has to obviously have some sort of historical significance, and it has to maintain its physical integrity connected to that historical significance, meaning it can't be something that was completely rebuilt or anything like that. Anyone can nominate a place for the register, and then it's up to the National Park Service to then approve it. After that, the federal government doesn't guarantee that the place will be protected, but they will offer tax credits and grants to owners for preservation purposes, which is great news. Darcel's will be around for a long time. Now, we've got a lot of designated shopping days recently, right? Black Friday, Cyber Monday. But today, if you didn't know, is called Giving Tuesday. The news talks about it a lot. I'm sure you did know. It's a day where you can use your money to help others instead of just buying stuff for yourself or your immediate family. So if you can give, here are a few local ideas for dinner, maybe tonight. Check out some of the places on Mississippi Avenue for takeout. All right, dozens of restaurants there and shops are giving 10% of their sales to the Boise Elliott Humboldt School. The Oregon Humane Society is actually the one doing the giving this year. They handed out free pet food today, and they'll be doing it again tomorrow from 3 until 7. Pet food can be so expensive, and they're doing it at their storage facility near their main Northeast Portland shelter. If you want to help them out, the Humane Society always takes donations of both food and money. So maybe give while they're giving, okay? And of course, we have the KGW Great Toy Drive. This year, we're asking people to make their donations online. It's kind of the safest way to do this. And then we'll buy the toys for you. So go to kgw.com/toy, click Donate Cash. This week, Cricket Wireless, by the way, is going to double your donation. So if you donate something, it means twice the toys for kids in need. A big thanks, as always, to our partners at Regions Blue Cross Blue Shield, IQ Credit Union, and local Toyota dealerships. Really great people. In a normal year, we would do all these kind of toy drives with them and go do shopping sprees. They're awesome people, and they help us out every year. Of course, thank you to everyone who has donated so far or plans to donate. All right, we're going to share your thoughts on tonight's show next. Remember to use that hashtag HeyDan or email thestory@kgw.com. I'm not begging, all right? Or message us on Instagram. We're going to finish this thing up next. A lot of comments right off the top of the show. Did I say doo-doo-doozy? Yes, I did. Nancy Peters, it was advertised that the big story tonight was going to be about the bottle drop place. What happened? I'm glad you asked this question. So if you're an NFL fan, you probably know that the big game between the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Baltimore Ravens that was supposed to happen the Thursday of Thanksgiving, there was a COVID scare. Some people got sick with the Ravens, and so they moved the game to Sunday. And that wasn't good enough, so they moved it to Monday or Tuesday, and now it's Wednesday afternoon. So that kind of screwed up kind of our planning as well. So that story is going to air tomorrow night on The Story. Kyla Boshi is doing a big investigation on the bottle drop, so if you're interested in that, stick around for it. That's going to be the one. I hope that answers your question. I got some more here, but man, I got flooded tonight. There's a ton of them. I'll see what we can do this week to continue answering them. Thanks for being with us. That's The Story. I'm Dan Haggerty. We'll see you back here tomorrow.